Time once again for the Integrateness podcast with Jason and Jolene. I'm Jason. She's Jolene, sitting right over there. Jolene, how are you now?
Fucking sad. I'm so sad.
Sad.
It's so
Why are you
dark.
sad?
It's so dark in the mornings. It's so dark at night. I'm solar powered and I'm running low.
I thought you were incapable of sadness and low moods. The whole time the year I've known you, year plus now, you've never once been like, man, you know what I
Oh,
mean? Till
you
now.
should talk to my kids every day. They're like, Mommy, I'm sorry you're sad.
I thought that was just a parent thing, right?
Totally. I cry on the daily. I never used to though. Right now I have safety to cry, so it's also an emotion I express more readily now than I used to. But yeah. No, for the most part I'm pretty good. I like to I'm fairly high energy, but I will tell you that dark mornings, dark nights make for long days, right? They're confusing. Before, my kids used to be able to like come home and play in the street for a while even after dinner, and it's just dark. Dark.
It is. It's one of those things because like I am one of those few people, I think, that loves fall winter. Like love it. I love the dark. Maybe it's
The,
because I got a darkness inside of me that just feels like it can thrive at this time of year. And my favorite holidays, Halloween, and my favorite movies are the Halloween movies and horror movies and stuff. And I hunt ghosts, so it just kind of lends itself to dark, right? I've loved it since I was a kid. Summer, it's hot, sticky. It was neat to go to the lake and swim and everything. But once like the leaves started to fall, and especially when the time changed earlier. Remember when it used to change like pre-Halloween? And it would be like dark at like 4:30, but it was like late October, man. This is my time of year. When we had that what do we call it now when it's really warm later? We used to call it Indian summer, but I don't think we're allowed to anymore.
I know that's all I ever knew it as too. Listeners, if you guys know the new name, please let us know. We'd like to be PC.
Half of us like to be PC. But I kid. But it was driving me nuts because people are like, oh yeah, they're wearing shorts and it's 22 degrees and it's the middle to late October. This is awesome. I'm like, it's not. You're not even wearing socks. Like what the hell? But I was like, I can't even get in the mood. It's like Halloween's like 2 weeks away. I haven't even decorated yet. Yes, I decorate like weeks in advance of Halloween. But because it didn't feel like fall or Halloween was coming. But now that the weather's transitioned, when it hit that, I think like third weekend in October, and the weather started to change, and I was like, yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's funny because if you guys could look at us right now, I have this like bright light coming into my office, and Jason's hanging out in his basement. That's his office, right? So we have this beautiful polarity of light and dark playing out here, which I think everybody can pick up on. But that being said, my work gets really dark, and I'm like the person who brings the flashlight to mind people in the darkness, right? Like I love digging into the darkness, but my environment, yeah, I actually have a really hard time in the house I live in now. I remember, especially when I was like stuck inside through smoky summers and just through my maternity leave, especially with my twins, when I was like really paralyzed to my house way before quarantine was a thing. I remember having issues like oddly freaking out and being like, how do I get more light in here? Like, how do we add more light bulbs? Because it was just like this low grade kind of dullness. There was like no, because the sun goes low and it doesn't come through my windows the same way. And I have like a north south facing house primarily instead of like east west, right? So not getting the same sun coverage. It was really difficult, still is. And like, dark cupboards in my kitchen, I would love to get white because I just don't like it so dark in there.
My wife's the same. She has to have like, we don't even close except for with sleeping. Curtains are open
Yeah.
all hours of the day, even nights. So as much natural light or even artificial light coming into our house. So she loves that. And even the base, she has an office downstairs too, but it's the room with like the two windows that faces the sun for a good portion of the day. You know what I mean? Like she needs that light. And I'll be downstairs even at night. And I like the two low watt light bulbs are on, and I'm kind of just listening to music on the vinyl. And she's like, "Why do you like it so dark?" And I'm very cheerful. I'm like, "Because it's great. This is perfect. I'm
Yeah.
awesome. I
You
can handle
guys,
this."
yeah, like back in the day when Jason would put black eyeliner on.
I never did the goth thing. I think we called it goth back then and not emo.
Oh,
Yeah, it's very the opposite. But I wore a lot of black.
Mhm.
A
So I
lot
think,
of black.
yeah, well, and that's the other thing. I actually wear a lot of dark colors too, and that's more of like putting a pair of sunglasses on as like an energy buffer. For sure, it's a way of me controlling how much energy kind of attracts and comes in, especially since I intentionally work with energy. So there's a big piece of that black that's very intentional, right? It's the like
I never thought of
absorption
that.
of all of the colors in a sense. But we want to get people thinking because you guys have gotten to know us well enough to know like how well we cope through life, how we've kind of ebbed and flowed with the waves that have come through. And we're relatively resourced individuals who are still experiencing the same human life that you guys are. But everybody is impacted by changes of seasons, some in better ways, some in more negative ways. And then some people are even more biologically impacted. So when we're looking at seasonal affective disorder, which is why I said I was sad, right? It's interesting that it like acronyms into sad, but looking at like there is a phenomena where they've categorized it as like a diagnosis. But I think if we all start to just live a little more intuitively to recognize like when we get influenced by certain things, like springtime is typically manic time, that's when things start to pick up, that's when people get more energy. Well, yeah, because we were typically in a lower energy point. And if we were to look at nature and the way cycles play out in our seasons, I mean, you've got fall when things are kind of falling away and we kind of get to harvest everything that we've just spent the last many months growing and working on. And then it's like things go dormant, right? The trees are not actively growing in the wintertime in the ways that they used to. The plants aren't like there has to be a rest season in order for the new growing and abundant season to come. And when we can really embrace the cycles of life that way, suddenly it's not like I really hate pathologizing this time of year into some kind of diagnostic category. But again, we were meant to be so productive through those times because we have ways that we can override this natural system. So we have heaters in homes, we have heaters in cars, we have things that plow the roads. We don't have things that actually hermit us for a couple of months to really sit in and rest and normalize that this is our non-mobile time of the year. This is what we stockpiled for. This is what we don't have to do any of that because we get our food in stores and we override all of that natural state of being and we function the same as we did in the summer, essentially by pushing through all those things. But we wonder why it's harder. We wonder why it's tougher to get out of bed. We wonder why. Well, because we never gave ourselves a season of rest. So
Exactly.
I want to really normalize that because I don't think societally we do. We're just like, why isn't it as easy as it was in June? And why couldn't I just, because we're not meant to go a buck 90 all year long. We were actually meant to, from a evolutionary standpoint, we were meant to go through productive seasons and less productive seasons. And winter is that. So it's about recognizing my day might start a little later and it might end a little earlier, thinking of the cycles of the darkness, right? And what does that look like? Where do I slow down? Right. But really, we don't because we're still running to hockey. We're still dropping kids off at dance at 9 o'clock at night. We're still doing all that bullshit. It's not bullshit. I get it. We like it, guys. But still recognize you're overriding the darkness in many ways. Right.
Imagine if we suddenly decided to revert in a sense. We give ourselves permission that through the winter we would treat it like we would have done pre-organized society.
Mm-hmm.
Do you imagine that? How awesome would that be to
I,
actually? And I landscaped for a year. And so,
yeah.
yeah, March got out, worked hard all summer, like backbreaking work. And then layoff hit in November. And it was like, I don't have to do anything
Mm-hmm.
for 3 to 4 months. And it was eventually because EI denied me because I went from a really high paying government job in employment counseling to go work in a lower paying job. Never mind, it was for my own mental health because I wanted to just destroy the world after trying to fix people's problems for so long. So I really respect that you can do that, Jolene. But I had 2 months, like till after Christmas, basically, where I could do nothing. And that was like almost the most joyous 2 adult months that I
Mm.
ever had because I had to do nothing.
Yeah, and I think you say joyous, but it's not like you were jumping up and down and being like exuberantly happy. I think what's joyous about it is that you were probably at a place of peace
Yeah.
and balance.
Yeah. It was
That
perfectly balanced.
Yeah, like we have a really messed up concept of what happiness and joy and all of that is. For me, like having a flow and peace and balance, feeling like time is not running too fast or too slow. Because again, time is another trip. We could do a whole session on time, right? But yeah, looking at that and being like, I was able to live intuitively. On a day where I felt productive, I could do that. On a day where I didn't and I wasn't feeling it, I could do that. And this is where, I mean, when we look at just like energy cycles in terms of not only seasonal stuff, but you know, on like monthly cycles. So for women, we cycle with the moon. So we actually have 28-day biological cycles, and that's what our energy operates on. So that's what I plan my business around, try and plan my life around that. But I definitely am more inspired. I have a lot more energy around the full moon. And then around the new moon, it tends to be a bit more of a quiet, kind of intuitive planning type time. And I really started to notice those patterns. So for women, we have like a 28-day cycle. So throughout the month, we'll find our productive times. For men, masculine energy, not just gender, but masculine energy. That's typically what this Western culture operates on. And it's a 24-hour clock. So it actually replenishes itself every 24 hours. So you guys are like the 9 to 5. That's why you can push through in that way. So you've got a bunch of women on a 28-day cycle operating on a 24-hour masculine dominant cycle. And you can see where burnout fits for many people on that one, right? But if we were able to live more intuitively, which means, you know, I know people who have, since COVID especially, decided to just homeschool their kids, and they're like, I want my kids to wake up when it feels right for their body. I don't want to rush them out of the house. I don't want to force feed them at different times when they don't need to. I want them to feel like they have flexibility around when they can move, when they cannot. I feel like your wheels are turning right now, Jason, because you're like, that's all I ever wanted as a kid.
To not get up and go to school. Yes.
Right. But yeah, there's a lot of people who are doing that. And I know for me, being my own, and you as well, Jason, like running your own business hours now, you know, my kids were talking about that on the way to school this morning. My daughter was like, Mom, I want to be my own boss when I'm older. I want to make my own money. And I was like, girlfriend, do it, because that is the freedom in life right there. I get to choose my own hours. I'm kind of a dick and make myself like, this is my day off. I'm recording on my day off. And someone pointed out, like, that doesn't seem like a day off. I was like, oh yeah, I guess it's not, but it's a day off from client work, right? It feels like a different kind of day. But really recognizing I have my own autonomy over what that looks like. If I wanted to start a little later in my day, then I would have flexibility to do that, right? I think that's so important when we have agency over what we are doing. And think about going back to the old resentments episode, like when we're forced to do things we don't want to do and our body doesn't feel like doing, like waking up, going to work, you know, people who were able to stay home during COVID and now have gone back to like a gradual half in the office, half at home, they're happier people because they're not forcing themselves into these uncomfortable places all the time, which might mean they can maybe not put makeup on for work that day. And that feels like fucking liberating as hell, you know, or save them half an hour in the morning or whatever.
Or even just work all day in your pajamas or your sweats, right? And if you want to take a break and go out for lunch, you can when you want to, not when it's the mandated 12 to 1.
Yeah, when we look at like giving people freedom of choice over some basic fucking needs in their lives, we have so much more life satisfaction, right?
Huge, right? And that's where I think, taking it back to sort of the weather, if you're in tune with the season and you're able to then manage yourself around that, you're probably not going to get as bummed out in mid-December when it's cold, the coldest and the darkest and everything, and you're feeling the most down. You might not feel that way because you are intuitively living around these natural cycles in the world.
And embracing them, right? And then, you know, like I said, I'm very openly a summer girl. I'm a girl of the light in many ways, but like also embracing, okay, now is the time that I sink into a different space, and it might not be my favorite, but it's necessary, right?
Yeah.
And recognizing that piece too. Yeah. And a lot of people, like, you naturally start to eat with the seasons. So we can eat lighter food in the warmer weather, right? So I love Chinese medicine follows a lot of this depending on the seasons. There's often different herbs and different foods that support you know, whatever season it is and whatever element is highlighted in that season and stuff. It's really cool to follow that philosophy if you're interested. But there's different ways that you can eat with the seasons. A lot of people feel like, you know, it's kind of like soup and stew time, a little bit heartier root vegetable type things, maybe more carb starch heavy in some ways. But again, this is like kind of hibernation-y time in a sense, but we also aren't utilizing as much energy as well. So recognizing some of those pieces, but like, I can eat all the fresh veggies and salads and stuff in the summer, but man, it's almost like mid-September, early October hits, and it's like a hard sell to swallow some salad. Like I just can't do it. It's weird, but I will take all those same vegetables and I will roast them, and it's just so nourishing. But to eat them raw is like, fuck, really? Yeah, it's strange.
It's true. It's true. And I think that's why you're right. Like, in the stew is a big fall winter dish, right? And it's all loaded
Mhm.
with all the same vegetables you put in your salad plus meat, but it's just
Mhm.
cooked different.
Yeah.
And I think you just
And
did, and
and
that's done, I think, out of necessity. Partly, you've have all this stuff that you, like you said, harvested all through the summer. You've now got it. You got to do something with it, and it's going to sustain you all winter.
yeah, totally right. But yeah, try and catch me eating a stew in the middle of July.
No,
Not gonna happen,
no,
right?
no,
Like it's
no.
really interesting. So naturally your body's going to crave and want some of these things as well. Yeah, some people, you might find you're sleeping a little bit more in the winter because probably your melatonin is getting produced earlier in the night because you're getting cues like dark windows and things like that, right? For my kids, it's way easier to get them to bed this time of night than when summertime hits and it's like sun shining through the window at 9:30 at night still. They're like, Mom, the moon's not out, it's not bedtime.
My
you
kids
know
was the same. We had to, he's old enough now that he can stay up later, but yeah, even 2 years ago, it was tough. Like, nobody, you still got to go to bed at 8:30. You still need your 12 hours because you're growing, right? And it was just, and he was still up till 11 because it was bright. Like,
Ah, totally right. Yeah. And then like someone's crying by the end of the night and it's not him. Yeah.
yeah. You're just allowing that to come out. And then I go outside and have my cigar and my whiskey because that's just how I'm resetting. To
Yeah.
our last episode.
Yeah. But like, ask yourself, where am I coping a little bit more? Like, we talked about substance use in the last episode and like, is this time when you're drinking ramps up? For me, it was the opposite. Mine's more related to social kind of enjoyment times, not so much with the bluesy times, right? The boozy bluesies, but that is pretty common, right? Some people will be sticking in, or maybe you have more opportunities to socialize. We got Christmas parties, possibly, we've missed out on that last few years, but they're starting up and people are just socializing more. And we always have these celebratory reasons for things, stuff like that. So start kind of looking at that. And then people who do have, a diagnosis that they maybe take medications for, do you adjust your medications this time of year? Are there other things? Some people actually do light therapy. So they've got these really great light therapy lamps you can get. I know Costco has sold them before and people have gotten them. So some people will do light therapy in the morning. If you read a book or the place you drink your coffee, I could put mine on my desk, like just facing me all day long kind of thing. Jason's got this amazing light rolling through his window right now. That's really, see, look, we're bringing some light to the darkness, Jason.
Ah, it burns.
He's burning. I'm throwing garlic at him right now, you guys. Um, but yeah, recognizing like there's things you can do. I know people who regardless of maybe like the skin cancer risk, but that this was an old school 90s thing, like in the winter would do more tanning booth things, right? Because let's face it, everything looks better tanned. But also because of that light, right? Some people double up on their vitamin D, triple up, quadruple up, kind of thing. They'll take more vitamin D. They might just be trying to enhance the happy neurochemicals through exercise and intentionally doing more of that. I'm also going to recommend, it's not just about like exercise, but also connection. We can get more disconnected in the winter because there's just less social activities or maybe things like that that get us out and about. We're less likely to get out because it's cold and kind of yucky. So encouraging connection with others, because that'll increase your oxytocin, your connection hormone, and like some serotonin and some things like that from the happy hormones, because we naturally also get lowered immunity at this time of year as well. And all of those things are linked with higher immunity, right? When we have good social circles and we have good social connection, which is also why through COVID, that was the whole isolation bit was actually really hard on our immune systems, right?
Especially in the wintertime. It got way bad. Remember when they did the big lockdowns for the last two Christmases, basically? They were telling people not to socialize. That made, I know a lot of people got sick, and I think the even people I knew who were up were depressed.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
for sure. So all of those things affect our immune system. So we are this like big, beautiful ecosystem of things influencing other things, right? And like again, if we can get a little bit more sleep at this time of year, recognizing that this is our more restful time, we're not meant to be as productive as we have been at other times, and to like give ourselves permission for that, because so much of our core cognition of like who we are, our purpose, and our worth is linked to what we produce. We need to societally really kind of gear that back so that we each can give ourselves permission to like do less this time of year, because it'll impact your mood. You'll get more sleep, you'll have better immunity, and then you kind of come out of that in this new fresh rejuvenated state to like take on what springtime summer is going to bring, allow yourself to kind of do those and then find enjoyable activities. So I was talking about about this the other day, is people who hate winter. So as a kid, we like love winter because, oh, it's snowing. And then like it gets to a point where you're like, oh, I don't want to drive in this, or I can't wear certain clothes in this. And it's such a pain in the ass, or it's so cold. For me, I had a really bad car accident in the winter. So that was always a big trigger for me, like since my early 20s. So I really started to dread wintertime for those reasons. So I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is torture. So in my early 20s, like forced myself to take up snowboarding. I was never a winter sport person. We just didn't have the capacity in my family. And I took up snowboarding for a few years to force myself to be excited for snowfalls and to like drive up to the hill and conquer all those things. Right. So then I got excited for it. And then it kind of wore off and became a pain in the ass again and some things like that. But then when I had kids, snow became exciting again because it's so much funner for them to play in the snow than just the cold itself. Right. So finding things that you can enjoy in the cold weather that you can't do in the summer, and really kind of anchoring into that and like stepping outside the box, even if it's just going into the backcountry and having a fire with your family, right? And enjoying being outside in the cold so that you're not just sitting there despising it until March or April comes.
It's like anything. It's you adapt, find ways to adapt to the situation. And I think as a species, because we've become so hooked in our comforts, like we love the comforts, we don't want to give up the comforts, and we're very much, we talked about this a few episodes back, becoming risk averse and not wanting to go out of our comfort zone. I think you need to do that because it just makes life, it might be hard at first, but life becomes more rewarding in that sense, I think, in the long run. And the more you kind of run towards what's making you feel uncomfortable or scaring you, the less uncomfortable and scary you get. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's great that you went and did the snow, you did like, the snowboarding. I took up like snowshoeing. I love to sort of even just sit outside around a bonfire, up
Yeah.
in the hills. It's just stuff that it makes it a more, I liked it anyways, but it makes it more pleasurable, and you can still bond with other people.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And then recognize, are you one of those people? Like, I know people who live up north, like Yukon kind of area, and they're like, our winters are hard, right? Like they get extreme summer, extreme winter in terms of light and dark, not weather, like, yes, weather wise in the winter, but I mean, they don't have the most loveliest of summers, right? Beautiful in their own ways, but they recognize, like, oh, that's way too long for me. I have to go take a summer escape. So there's a lot of people who will seek that summer escape somewhere and go to a place where it's warm 24/7, right? I love being in Kamloops because it is a 4-season city. Like we legitimately get a spring, summer, winter, and or fall and winter, right? And I really love that. But there are people who resist that. Where, like you said, we're creatures of habit. We like predictability, we like stability. And what is less stable than 4 seasons a year, right? Like that's a lot of change. That's a lot to flow through, but it's gradual and it's subtle. And I think we are so blessed to be able to experience all 4 seasons. When you get to see those trees change and you get to see the entire cycle of seasons, I think that is beautiful. I love the summer, but I don't know if I could love the summer as much if I had it 365 days a year, right?
Well, I agree. It was an interesting Christmas because I was overseas in Australia, but it was 35 degrees out on Christmas Day, and you're wearing shorts, and it just wasn't the same. They got the trees and the Santa and all that, and I'm like, there's just something wrong here. What I missed having that cold, the fire in the fireplace, the snow on the ground, Christmas. I couldn't do it.
Totally.
I could not do warm weather. I couldn't, and same as much as I love fall and winter, I couldn't live in like the Arctic where it was just cold and snowy 365 days a year. You need that variety. That makes you appreciate It's like in life, you got to have the hard times to appreciate the good times, right? You got to have balance, order, and chaos. It's all important and it's all good.
Bingo. Yeah. So we're really just encouraging people to flow with the change. And if you're expecting yourself to function in these next like 3, 4 months, the same way that you have been functioning for the past 3 or 4, get the hell out of here already, because you're not going to. You really need to embrace that there is a different flow of life during this time of year, and that there's not something wrong with you if you are not functioning the way you were before. It's about embracing and listening to yourself of like, what do you need this season? Because you're not wearing the same clothes and you're not wearing the same shoes. I look down and I am right now when we're recording this. I've got sandals on. But but essentially, you adjust your external environment. You've turned your furnaces on in your house, right? Like, let your body do this too. Let your energy do this. Let your input output centers, in terms of what you are producing and what you're doing as a human, to do the same thing. We give that grace to every other thing in our life except for ourselves.
Yeah,
Makes no
in all things almost. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we
sense.
are the hardest on ourselves in all aspects when we give that same kindness where that we need at those moments to other people,
Oh, for sure. For
right?
sure.
So yeah, there you go. The weather, sort of, on Into Greatness podcast.
Right.
Jason and Jolene. But that was a really good chat. And I think there's some, hopefully you take away some good stuff there and give yourself permission just to change a little bit this winter season.
Yeah,
You'll probably like it a lot more if you do.
I think so. Embrace it. Embrace it.
Much like I embrace the darkness, and I'm going to close these curtains now and go hide.
That
Until next week, I'm Jason.
I'm Jolene.
Talk to you then.